So I did a bit of research. So initially, when you started doing more transformational work with clients, it was more external for like gym, performance, body, etc. So what was the turning point to turn your coaching services from an external trade like fitness to an internal transformation, like doing shadow work and internal work?
It was kind of twofold. There was the personal piece, like my own journey, and then there was the client piece. So the personal piece was I was very insecure growing up, and I found the gym in my teens, and I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. And when I became an adult, quote unquote adult, I tried to become a fitness trainer. So this has gone back 20 years, and there was no fitness industry in Ireland. So I failed miserably with my first two businesses, and everyone around me said this is not going to work. But I gave it one last chance, and my business ended up scaling from 5 clients locally to 20,000 globally in 4 years. So from a personal standpoint, my whole life changed. And I thought, okay, I should be happy now. Like I've got a house and a car and a business and all these things, but I wasn't content. So that forced me to look inward. And I suppose from a client perspective, you work with 20,000 people and you start to see some people get results, most people don't. That's the reality. And so I was like, it's not about training, it's not about nutrition, there's more going on. And that led me to coaching initially and NLP and hypnosis, and very cognitive way of looking at things. And that was useful up to a certain point, and then you start to recognize that our cognition is influenced by our emotions, and so emotional health is important too. And yeah, I've just continued to kind of go on a journey, I suppose, inward.
Definitely. It's something I definitely resonate as well. Like having that, well, for me, it was more like everything was external validation. Like everything was performance, achievements, looks, conquests, all that sort of thing. And then, you hit a point where you're ticking boxes in those categories, and then you're still thinking, what's wrong? There's something more. When I get more achievements, I get more income, more status, more. And the thing I found is like probably about 3 or 4 years ago, the more I was getting and the more I was pushing into it, the worse things got internally. Yeah. Because I think you get to a point you actually realize, holy fuck, I'm getting more of what I actually want, and it's not. And like my coping strategies are like they're like getting increased and getting amplified and things like that. So, and going through that process to go, and you go through a process that you go, what the fuck's wrong with me? And you go from thinking I'm the fucking man to there's something not quite, this isn't quite fulfilling. I'm on this path to, you sort of get there and you go, what the fuck's going on?
Yeah, for me it was, I often say we're driven by wounding or worth. So wounding is there's something wrong with me, and if I achieve this thing, then I'll fix myself and I'll be able to cover up the wounding. Worth is, okay, I'm a work in progress, but I'm deserved of whatever I want in life, And I think for me, up until 28, I always had things I could point to for my depression or my anxiety. It was like, I don't have any money, I don't have a partner, and 28 was the first time in my life where I kind of had ticked all the boxes, and I was like, oh, there's something really wrong with me because there's nothing to point to. But what I recognized was that by avoiding the wounds and being driven by insecurity, paradoxically, it put a magnifying glass on the wounds, so I became more and more insecure over time. I ended up doing the Late Late Show in Ireland, which is the biggest TV show in the country, and I was like, that's the pinnacle. And it was probably the time when I was most insecure, because it was like so much attention coming inward, and I was like, surely they're going to see what I'm really like. That's the shame piece.
Did imposter syndrome come up?
Oh, for sure. It was one piece I share with people is I was driving home from the show with my parents, and it's the biggest TV show in the country in Ireland. They play it on Friday night. It's the thing you grow up watching. I think 1 million people watch in a population of 5 million people back in Ireland. And driving back home, 3-hour drive, I'm just going through Twitter and reading thousands of lovely messages, and one person I found was like, this guy's got no charisma, and I was like, oh. And I couldn't fathom that the thousands of people were right. I was kind of like, oh, there must be something wrong with them that they think I'm a nice guy and stuff. I was like, but the guy that thinks I have no charisma, he sees what I'm really like. So that's kind of shame. And that's the thing that drives a lot of us entrepreneurially. I think at the start is shame. Like, if there's something wrong with me, there's something bad, there's something flawed. But if I do X, Y, and Z, maybe it'll make that go away. But it doesn't.
It just exacerbates it. Where did your shame originate from?
A lot of bullying growing up. That was the starting point, I would say. And I think it was like emotionally quite sensitive, which is a superpower now, and it's been a superpower in my work. But as a young man, young boy, it was made me a target, I suppose, that I was quite vulnerable. I was quite expressive, and that got shut down pretty quick. So yeah, I think that was the early stages, was first day of school, getting bullied and learning that it's not safe to be myself in the world, and I better wear some masks.
Yeah, exactly. That's when you're breaking down different type of masks for entrepreneurs. How do you sort of help them through that process?
There's a process or a modality called internal family systems, which is a really great form of therapy. And in simple terms, the way I kind of share it with people, it's from a guy called Dick Schwartz. And he'll say that at times in our lives when we experience pain that's too overwhelming or emotion that's not safe to express, we freeze. In a sense, we freeze in our bodies, we freeze in our psyche. And it's almost like, I use myself as an example. When I was bullied as a kid, it was overwhelming. And it wasn't safe to cry, it wasn't safe to run away. And so there's this fight or flight energy, but you freeze. And it's almost like the psyche and all its genius says, we don't want this to happen again. Let's develop a persona or a mask to keep ourselves safe. We sort of scan our environment to figure out like what's the best strategy. So for some people, when they're bullied, the strategy is to become a bully. So then you're safe. For others, it's become the class clown. For others, they become an achiever. For others, they isolate themselves. And so I think it's just the young mind comes up with a strategy that makes sense at the time. And, our early imprints, the first 7 years of our life, is really about how do I adapt to my environment in such a way that I can win love. So if my father loves sport, and I recognize that when I achieve in sport, I'm probably going to, chase my father's love through sport. And so a lot of who we become is not necessarily authentic, it's adapted. So it's different depending on I think 3 layers that I often talk about is first your family layer. So what you learn in your family about who you need to be. And then your community, which is school, athletics, the kind of wider sphere. And then the third layer, which is really strong, is the cultural layer. So the media you would have watched growing up, which told you what it was to be a man or be a woman, your religion, the gender, the nationality. So much of this kind of conditions us, like this is who you need to be if you want to fit in with the tribe.
Definitely. And it's interesting when you have, those 3 layers, when you have, for example, the familial layer, there might be behaviors that there's a lot of shame and guilt around, but at a cultural layer, it might be different.
Yeah.
Like there's incongruences between the different layers in terms of, for example, like I would have had in my 20s, obviously my life was all about, in my teenage years, it was all about being good at sports. That's where I got love originally. It wasn't being intellectually smart. It wasn't being, it was pretty much just being good at sports and playing like state level sports and getting love from my father via that way. Then it became, it transitioned into like, early 20s, and then it's like, okay, you're with guys. Sports is one thing, and then it's like, okay, now it's women. So then it's about getting good at performing with women and picking up women and living that life. And that life became a 20. So that was like, that was a form of love and connection. So then even in that, then it's like the younger men that I was, hanging around then, there's a huge disconnect between, there was in my family, there was so much shame around sex, drugs, all that. Like it wasn't even spoken about. So I went to all boys school since I was 9. So everything was just like, Irish Catholic upbringing as well.
I know that.
Like, yeah. So it's just like, just suppress all that sort of stuff and don't even talk about it. So there's so much shame with that. Where in other layers that I was getting love and acceptance. So there's this huge disconnect.
Yeah.
In terms of different layers. So I always find it's, interesting if, if someone's in a work environment or, social environment and something's very, there's something that they do, but religiously, culturally, or family, there's a disconnect, and inherently that's just going to like push shame further into the shadow.
Yeah, and I think it's it's kind of heartbreaking in a way, like when people have that much fragmentation where, I think of someone maybe who's not comfortable with their sexual orientation and they've got to present in one way in one place and another way in another. It's like sometimes when people start doing the inner work, they'll recognize, I'm not being authentic in work. And I'm like, what do you mean by that? And they'll say, well, I'm not speaking my truth. And I'm like, you don't have to be authentic in every moment. It's not really about that. Like you can't probably go into work and speak in work the same way you do with your partner or your family. There's boundaries and there's different ways we communicate in different layers. But I think ultimately it's about, how much of my life can I actually be my authentic self? And when I'm not being my authentic self, am I aware of that? So I do corporate workshops. It's not my favorite thing in the world, but I appreciate the work that I get. But I'm a different guy on a corporate workshop to who I am now speaking to you. It's not vastly different, but I recognize that there's nothing wrong with putting on the mask every now and then. And I think that's something people need to maybe recognize, because sometimes people shame themselves. They're like, I'm completely inauthentic. I'm like, you're not inauthentic. No. You're wearing the appropriate mask for the given time. It's just knowing when to put down the mask.
Correct. Yeah. And if someone's just like absolutely 100% authentic all the time, you could be totally inappropriate in times.
You go to Ubud.
Yeah. And you might, there's that, you don't want to be too much for people, but I think there's sometimes you just got to weigh up things and go like, is it necessary for me to be just fully come in like a wrecking machine and be full authentic and just lay down the law with people? Sometimes like you don't need to, or you might, as I said, you might have to just adapt who you are a little bit to the environment or to a client, or, and although authenticity at the core of things is amazing. Yeah, as you said, you don't have to be like just 100% in the moment every single time. That's where social intelligence comes in without sort of falling towards like heavy people pleasing, and then holding a mask. So I think what you said's pretty interesting with building up, particularly understanding like Irish culture as well. As you've grown more online and you're doing something very non-conventional to like Australian culture, UK, Irish culture, that sort of thing, how have you found people have been treating you from back home?
Interesting question.
There's a thing we've got in Australia called tall poppy syndrome. Have you heard of that?
Oh, yeah.
You understand that?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So in Australia, if you're doing something and you're starting to do really well, they'll start shitting all over you. Like when you just start the journey, especially if it's non-conventional. Like Australia loves athletes and sports people, so that they don't get as much put into this. So tall poppy syndrome particularly might be someone starts a business, who was working, and then people start looking and go, what the fuck, who the fuck you do that? You start a podcast, start doing content. You decide to be a creative. You want to be an author. You want to be an actor. Those sort of things that are like very non-conventional jobs where people like in cultures like ours, they can't really always get their head around it, because they're not like epicenters for where people like that sort of present. So have you found in saying that, as you're doing something very non-conventional, but something very aligned with you, and you're starting to build your business, build your profile, how's that process sort of been for you?
Truthfully, it's been a very smooth process, I would say, which is probably not the answer I would have expected to give. But funny, when I started in fitness, 2012, I'd failed with these two businesses. I started my small class on the local beach, and it just kind of took off. And on social media back then, I started telling the story. I mean, I didn't have anyone to follow. I was just kind of doing my thing. So I put up a picture of 5 people on the beach, and then next week there's 20, and next week there's 40. And people started buying into my story, the hero's journey. Like, oh wow, this guy came home broke on Christmas Eve with his tail between his legs. He was lost, he was depressed, and now he's starting to build something. I was working in a pizza shop at the time. So there was a lot of support kind of for the local guy and stuff like that, which was lovely. And there was probably a little bit of a tipping point where people started to, just little things. And there was a part of me that wanted to be a victim. I'm like, oh, I'm just trying to do my best. I'm just trying to
be humble.
Yeah, there was a bit of that. And like, I'm like, oh, I'm not, I would have been criticized by other personal trainers because, I had such a volume of people that I was given generic plans. I wasn't doing like customized nutrition. I wasn't doing like assessments on people.
With 20,000 clients, come on. I thought that'd be all individualized, and you just spend hours a day just mapping out the perfect program for them and giving them the perfect amount of support.
How bad of me. But it's funny, in retrospect, I look back, and at the time I was like, there'd be forums where they'd be talking about me, and there'd be gossip forums, and that's still the case in certain ways. But at the time, there was probably my ego. I was like, oh, I'm just a young guy who's trying his best and stuff. The reality was I was making a lot of money. I was scaling a lot of things. So I could see why people would be pissed off. And everyone's got their own perspective, so I don't really take it personally in any way. It's just... I was at a Paul Chek conference years ago. Paul Chek's like, you probably know. And one of the clients, he was quite straight. He says, oh, what do you do? And I said, oh, I run an online fitness program. He says, what does that look like? I said, about 800 people a month, and we do kind of paleo nutrition, a couple of at-home workouts, and a bit of support. And he's like, Paul would say you're a prostitute. Just straight
That's
up.
authentic.
Yeah, and I was like, okay. But to answer your question around tall poppy syndrome, the bit of criticism, but like relative to the amount of people I've worked with and having done some of the things I've done, I feel very lucky that I've been fairly well received. one thing I have kind of noticed in myself over the years is there is a bit of fear around like stepping away from that identity of being the ordinary guy next door. So like certain things is like I will limit myself sometimes, or have at least in the past, where I'm like, oh, I can't do that because people like me doing well. But if I did any better than this, maybe it wouldn't be so safe, you know?
That was literally where I was going to segue. The next question is, did you have any shame around or any resistance around making that sort of money?
Did I have any resistance?
Unconscious normally.
Yeah.
Did you feel like you sabotaged in any sort of way, or you had to change, really hide elements of who you are to not trigger others?
The funny way I used to find myself kind of hiding, or like I remember going to Tony Robbins maybe 2015. I'd read his book since I was a teenager, and so I went to like this 4-day conference he was doing in New York. And when I arrived, I was like, oh, this is hectic, like 10,000 people. This is not what I expected. And I think within 5 minutes of being in the room, he said something that landed. And it was something to the effect of, when you start something new, you've got all this energy and you've nothing to lose, so you go for it. But then you start to build something and suddenly you have something to lose, so you can start playing it safe. And I kind of recognized that in myself, that when I started on the beach, I had no rent to pay, I had no nothing. So I just used to play fun games with the clients. We used to have a bit of crack. We used to go out on the weekends. And then when I had a couple of hundred clients, suddenly I was like, how is a personal trainer supposed to dress? And I'm trying to dress in certain ways, like I am today, trying to wear a polo shirt. And I don't want to wear a polo shirt. So I would find myself, just almost not trusting myself. Like the first couple of times I did TV, I was brought in as the weekly expert for fitness, you know, and they said, oh, Mary's just sent in a question, how do you get a six-pack? And my answer in my mind would be, well, you eat a bit healthier and you move a bit more. But I'd be like, that's not the answer they want. So I'd jump into, what do they want? And I'd be like, oh, well, sit-ups. And you know, I'd just be answering all these.
Just make it more complicated than this.
Just thinking, okay, I've got a role now, so I need to fit into the role or the other person's perspective. But shame around the money piece, not so much. I mean, I wasn't flash. I'm not flash. I just kind of spend on what I like, you know.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's because you're such a well, since I've met you, and I can sort of see you. I'm assuming you wouldn't have had a massive head or massive ego before, but I think like when people, and you're so grounded now. So like I think it's for me, so personally, why I asked you that question, I found it very, very challenging transitioning from, you know, for me, just, you know, before I was doing any content, it was like, oh, he's this guy who's like, does jiu-jitsu, does competitions, he hasn't put out too much content, he's got this chiro business, he's doing right. It was like very generally non-triggering for a lot of people. It wasn't too confronting, because even being a chiro is a very polarizing profession.
Sure.
Very polarizing profession.
Yeah.
Everyone's got their 2 cents.
Yeah.
Either like them or I fucking hate them. And most of the ones I hate them have never even been to one. And there's a lot of shit chiros out there as well. So it's like they don't do the profession any justice. So I think for me doing that, then I decided, all right, I was doing a bit of content to get lead generation for my business. This is probably like 6 years ago. So not many people doing that. And then I actually went into proper doing content and actually doing content, and then started getting, you know, and as I did that, and you're trying to figure out that process, and like, you know, with like trying, you might do some skits, you might do different stand adjustments, you might do tips and education, and just seeing what works. And in that process of trying to figure out what works, I still didn't truly, and that was probably 2022, 3 years ago, I still didn't really understand myself. And that's a work in progress. But I look back now, like, you're trying to be something. You weren't actually being yourself. Yeah, and you got to try different things to see what works. But like, you were times where you went away from yourself and you're doing these other things just to potentially increase viewership. And like, you know, I was like, for example, I went and just like talking about just dressed. My thing was like, okay, I'm going to be like this Aussie chiro international and just dress and drip. Okay. Just drip myself out. And like, this is going to be, and you know, the sort of people I'm going to adjust is like, you know, fit girls, fit guys, international characters. Like, it's just all like, it just came from a place of like, it's just entertainment.
Sure.
You know, there's no substance behind it.
Sure.
It's just entertainment. And then it wasn't really necessarily serving my business. My business was good before. Like, that didn't make my business more successful. But like, it brought all these eyeballs on. And I think a lot of people then start looking at you and go, the fuck are you doing? This is a bit much. Oh, you're posting like every day. this is a bit much. We're not like, Australian and Irish culture is quite similar. Like it can be a bit much if you're posting a lot, you're dressing a certain way, then it's like, fuck this guy. And as you do that, and then I transitioned into starting to do more internal work, and I was like, oh shit, okay, I want to really help, particularly other driven men, particularly entrepreneurs, start to understand the inner world. And even when I started that process, that was 2.5, 3 years ago, I was fucking clueless. I only just started my healing journey. Like I'd done like a lot of like performance work in terms of, understanding like myself from a performance perspective. But even then, how I view performance is quite different now in terms of actually getting in true performance, getting alignment with yourself. But then I started a podcast with another guy and we're talking about like men's work. So here's this gone from Cairo doing all this dressing up and just being ridiculous and doing all that stuff and getting eyeballs and getting hundreds of thousands of followers on TikTok, and then pivoting towards like a podcast. And this was when it was like peak Andrew Tate era, like 2.5, 3 years ago. And then there's that whole like, what the fuck are you doing? Who the fuck are you doing? Do a podcast? Stay in your lane. What the fuck are you doing? And then I was like, had this disconnect between, I've got this passion, but I didn't completely own it. And I still took probably like a good 18 months, 2 years to then like actually start to get that thing of like, I want to work with driven men, but like I'm not doing men's work and healing with them. I understand that process from going through it myself, and I can apply different things I've learned, but it's more about just self-awareness, more like understanding from a chiropractor and doing that, breath work sort of courses and doing, understanding, psychology, human behavior, integrating like my understanding business and like integrating all these things so I can actually have a package to help like driven men who are quite similarly minded but probably a little bit behind me on the journey. And I'm like, now I'm getting closer and closer to what that North Star is. I'm like, it's clearer. But I had to sort of go through that process of being this fucking loud dickhead, doing chiropractic and then doing a podcast, which I didn't really know I was doing, to then get to a level it's like, okay, you're actually more in alignment. Yeah. And it sort of starts, I think, and now it feels, when I'm doing content, it actually feels like, oh shit, I'm actually doing stuff that's meaningful. Nice. It's not just trying to get views, So I think because I went through that process, it wasn't in a it didn't start in a grounded way. It was very like loud, and then I think in doing that, you sort of attract a lot of negative energy, and that sort of stuff. And when you're starting to do a podcast and talk about different things that, from your past, that it's just a weird transition. So I wasn't sure if you had some similarities or not really.
Two things come to mind actually. I've got a friend here in Bali, Tom Sparks. He runs a great podcast here. I think it's called the Sparks Podcast. I can't remember, but Tom had this quote that I always quote back to people, which I think applies to all areas of life. And he said, anything you bring into your life from a place of inauthenticity, you have to stay inauthentic if you want to keep it in your life. In other words, if I meet a partner and I'm being flash and I'm pretending I'm flash when I'm not flash, I need to remain flash to keep that person in my life. So same for business. If I build a business based on something that's not true for me, then I have to remain untrue to myself to keep the business. So I think that just speaks to the authenticity. But for me I think my mistake, but the thing I've seen back home is that when I got into fitness, there wasn't really an industry. That was 2012. And then when I got into personal development, 2015, there wasn't really an industry in Ireland. So I was doing these things because I wanted to do them. I was like, oh, this is what I like doing. This is what feels real for me. And then a couple of years later, it's kind of like kids growing up now and wanting to be YouTubers. Like that's the profession that they want to be. It was kind of like the same thing. People want to be this, that, and the other. So I think if it's not true for you, Steve Jobs maybe said that years ago, that like it's going to take so much work and so much of your energy that if it's not the thing that's right for you, don't waste your time.
Yeah, 100%.
So in that regard, I think I've been lucky. But I also have removed any kind of attachment to numbers like engagement or likes or anything like that.
Yeah, and I've only done that in recent times, probably in the last 12 months, and got to actually going, all right, you got to provide value.
But it's not. And it's kind of this, is it hedonic adaptation where we just change our standards? So they talk about social media that it used to be we'd compare ourselves to others. So I'd compare myself to you, I'd compare myself to the guy next door. But we also compare ourselves to our best self. So if I get a post that gets 1,000 likes, that becomes my new baseline. And then suddenly I feel bad for every post that gets 100 likes. I'm like, wait a second. If 100 people stood in front of me and said, thumbs up, I like what you're saying, that would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
But it can just mess up our kind of
100%. And it's very unrealistic as well to have not have an accurate reflection of what your baseline in, whether it's jiu-jitsu, whether it's your body composition, whether it's your fitness, whether it's your energy or how you feel and that sort of thing, and just having like a pretty grounded view of what your baseline is in whatever it is. Yeah, and I think when something's consistently at a higher level, it's like, yeah, but like what you said is spot on. Like being able, and so many guys do it, they like, they're like guys that like I treat as well, and they're like, they've put on weight, they've got families, their businesses or whatever, they're all those other metrics are going well, and their fitness is like just dog shit, and they're like, and they're just like, I just want to get back to like, being really fit, and like, I want to do a fight, and it's like, man, you're fucking 38. Okay, and it's like, when was the last time you fit? Like, you're really fit. Oh, like, man, when I was like 21, I was a weapon. I was just fit. I had all this energy. It's like amazing, but you're 21 and you're probably doing fuck all in the rest of your life. So you're 21, so you've got like, and comparing yourself to that as opposed to going realistically, okay, I just want to improve my fitness and my health, and seeing, okay, how does that look in my current life, and what can I do to start improving that, as opposed to I want to be the savage. I mean, you might get to a level where you're a savage, but like it's very like unrealistic, and just comparing to yourself is a massive one that people don't even.
Dude, I have a story on this. When I was 18, I moved to America to be a cage fighter. So it's gone back almost 20 years now. Yeah, I lived in San Diego for 6 months, and I trained with War Machine and Dominic Cruz and all these guys. I was no good. I was just delusional. Like, I was kind of like, okay, I want to do this. And my work was I worked in the gym. So I'd clean the gym 3 times a day. I'd do some inductions. And then every now and then, randomers would come in off the street and want to fight. So they'd sign a waiver, and me or some of the other guys would fight them. And but one time a guy came in, and like that, he was probably, at the time to me, he was middle-aged. He was probably only about 31, 32, and I was 18, and I was giving him an induction of the gym. And I was like, oh, have you trained before? And he's like, yeah, I wrestled in high school. I was just like looking at him. I was like, it's a long time since you were in high school. That's what I was thinking in my head. Anyway, as time goes by so fast, I woke up about 2 years ago, and I noticed myself with the same kind of, I put on a lot of weight during COVID and stuff. And I was just convinced in my head I was still an athlete, but the mirror was not reflecting 100%. That. I was like, oh, mother time is a cruel mistress. But
exactly right.
Yeah.
It's just having like letting go of attachment to what was.
Yeah.
I think that's so much of what we do is we have attachment to what was, what should be, live in the past.
Yeah.
Past successes, past failures.
I think DeMartini talks a lot about that. John DeMartini, he'll say, like, oftentimes we look back on the past and we infatuate. So you think about your partying days in college and you only see the highs and you don't 100%. See the lows. Or you look back on regrets and you only see the lows and you don't see the gifts. So John's a lot about like bringing things into balance.
Yeah. I did one of his workshops.
Ah, nice. I mean, I think his stuff is great. It's very heady, but I think it's really, really good.
Absolutely. You're right. It's like particularly when guys get older, single guys are like, get to a point where they're like, oh, I wouldn't mind, a good partner, family, that sort of stuff. And then the married guy's going, don't do it, don't do it. So they all want the opposite until they get the opposite.
Yeah.
And then it creates the new set of problems. It's like, whether you're single or you're a family guy, you're going to have issues. Yeah. If you're single, you're going to lack that connection.
Choose your heart. Huh?
Yeah, choose your heart. Yeah. It's like if you're gonna be rich, it's going to be hard. You're going to be poor, it's going to be hard. Yeah. Just pick your heart.
Yeah.
Circling back to like shadow work. So with ambitious men, how does the shadow normally show up?
I would say a lack of self-esteem. So a lot of masks, a lot of performance, a lack of self-worth below the mask. So it's kind of like, okay, well, I feel comfortable and confident when I'm at the front of the room speaking, but take away my identity and my kind of
shields.
Yeah. And then I don't really know who I am. It's really interesting, actually, kind of thought around the midlife crisis that might tie in here, that for a lot of men in our teens, so your first 7 years of life is important in terms of starting to understand like who I need to be in the world. But then when you come to your teens, it's almost like a second birth where it's like a new set of things, like your sexual energy comes online and you're in this messy kind of anxiety inducing place between not being a child anymore but also not being an adult. And so that's the time where you're like needing to grasp onto something, and so you grasp onto different identities again, and it's like what's attractive to the opposite sex if you're attracted to the opposite sex. So for a lot of guys, they'll decide in their teens, okay, well, I'm gonna need to look a certain way, I need to be successful in certain ways, and I need to, they'll kind of figure out in their teens, and then go into the world and do the business thing, make a lot of money, start the family, make a lot of, money, and just continue like that. And then the midlife crisis, one way of looking at it is they wake up at 40 or 50 or whatever age it might be, and they say, hold on a second, I've never looked after my own needs. I've put my family first, I've put my work first. I don't know who I am because since I was a teenager, I just shut all that down. So if you think about it, when the man goes out and gets the young woman in the sports car, it's like the 15-year-old self that never got what he actually wanted is acting out instead of acting out in a conscious way. So I think that's another way that the kind of the ambitious man's shadow plays out, is there's a lack of like true passions.
What are the more common coping strategies or coping behaviors?
Overworking, I would say, is a big one. Being a savior, like rescuing people.
Being the hero.
Being the hero, yeah. Something random that's just coming to me is, I don't know where I read it the other day. It said everyone should have a hobby in their life that they're almost embarrassed about. Because if you're embarrassed that you play frisbee or something,
you've rolled with me on the mats. Jiu-jitsu is my one.
No, jiu-jitsu is semi-cool depending on who you ask. But this said, like, if you've got a hobby that's just like I don't know, stamp collecting, or like, I mean, I'm pulling, no offense to anyone who likes these things, it's great. But it was saying that show that you really love the thing and you don't care what anyone thinks. Like, so you've got that kind of passion project. You're not doing things for appearance. I don't know why that came to me or where I heard that, but I thought it was interesting.
Definitely.
Yeah.
How does the ego get in the way of growth of high performers?
It's kind of what I was saying earlier about the Tony Robbins thing, that if you start playing it safe and you start trying to control things, so you have some growth by kind of listening to your inner voice and listening to your authentic self, and you start to open up some new opportunities in your life. So example, I don't know, you've been single for a long time, you challenge your ego by stepping out into the world and dating again, you meet someone, you open up to them, you open your heart, you listen to that part of you, and then you start fearing losing that person, and so you start contracting again. That would be one example maybe. So you don't continue to develop the relationship, you just go into a defensive way. I think the ego obviously loves certainty. So typically, if you think of the hero's journey, like this is the analogy often used, is that your favorite films or books or stories, the typical arc is the hero starts on their journey and they step into the unknown and they fight dragons and demons and they go through adversity and they meet mentors and they go through challenges. And then there's a death and a rebirth. There's a part in the movie where you're like, I don't know if they're going to make it, but they make it and they come back to the village again and they can kind of share their gifts. This represents our confrontation with the shadow. So if you step into something new in life, you're going to have to meet parts of yourself you haven't met before. And so you go into this uncertain place. And then when you come back and you push through it, you come back to normalcy. And the ego's like, okay, let's stay here. It doesn't want to go on the hero's journey again. So I think that's how the ego comes in. It's like, okay, let's steady the ship. And I think it's useful actually to steady the ship. If we didn't kind of clasp onto an identity every now and then again, we'd just be flowing through life with no sense of grounding.
Correct.
Ooh, bud. I shouldn't be. I got my judgments.
That's too reference. You're going to get 4 to 5 by the end of the day.
I'm teasing. Actually, maybe like a bit of an analogy or an idea would be if you think about 2 archetypes, think about the very corporate person who's very type A and just like straight looking in the direction. And then on the other side, you think about the artist who never finishes a painting and is just in the flow of life. Those might be the 2 extremes. If you tend to be more of the artist, then a bit of structure in your life might be supportive. If you tend to be the rigid type A person, then maybe a bit of flow might be important.
Play and things like that.
Yeah, and it'll change throughout your life, but I think that's the kind of balance. Coming back to something we spoke about earlier was like the authenticity and the different parts of ourselves. I think the sign of like spiritual growth or personal development or psychological growth is how much range do you have? So we can step on the jiu-jitsu mats and be savages. Hopefully we can go on a date and be a different type of person. And then we can go, not a date together, but we can go to a party. And then we can step into the business world. And we like,
don't know what Bali's done to you, mate.
Need to move to Ubud myself. But how much range do I have? Because like the person who's very shut down, like again, the overachiever is like, okay, well, I'm successful in business and that's all I have, but don't know how to connect with my family, don't know how to be a savage in the gym, don't know how to switch off. So how much range can I develop? I think it's a good question to ask.
What's the cost of not dealing with your shadow in business, relationships, and your health?
In all three, you'll just play out the same cycles time and time again. So we'll go through life. My kind of semi woo-woo way of seeing the world is you come in, you're given a body, and you've got a set of experiences that you're going to have in your life to teach you certain lessons. So your soul's got lessons to learn. And if you don't take the lesson from the experience and you just keep repeating the same thing, so I don't know, in relationship, if I keep choosing women who want me to rescue them and I play savior and I hope that if I save them, they'll love me, unless I recognize that as a pattern and I confront the part of me that feels guilt or feels like I need to rescue people, I'll just do that for the rest of my life. I'll just do the same thing with different people. It'll feel like a different experience, but it'll be the same experience played out time and time again. When you confront the shadow and you recognize what's been in the dark that's running your life, there's then choice. I think ultimately with psychological work, it's like, how can I develop more choice? If someone's had trauma or unacknowledged shadow, they just go down the same path every time. So you say something to me that I don't like, and my trauma is being rejected and ridiculed, maybe I'm going to collapse. Now, if I recognize that that's a pattern for me, you say something I don't like, I might be able to say, wait a second, that wasn't okay with me. And now I'm doing something new. So the cost is you don't get to move past what you've done up to this point, and you'll self-sabotage. You'll just do the same thing you've always done.
What do you find in businesses specifically? Where do you find it sort of really limits entrepreneurs?
I've seen a lot of talk recently, which I think is true, is that, you know, you don't have business problems, you have personal problems that show up in your business, which I think is a good way of looking at it. So if you run a business and you are frustrated with your staff because they don't understand what you're saying, there's a probability there's other areas of your life where you don't feel understood and you're not communicating
100%.
clearly. So how it shows up in business,
For me, the biggest shift that's happened, I've had the biggest growth in business enormously in the last 12 months. The number one thing I've started to work on in the last 12 months is developing like self-love, self-compassion, and more empathy. Also to myself. Yeah. Because I used to operate from a like resilient, you know, like I've always been like a people person, but like just a hard work grinder. Like, oh, I'm the business. Like your jobs aren't that hard. Like people just need to do this. I'm just so logical. It's not that difficult. You know, just get out of your own way. But like being able to actually understand. But the thing was, I was always self-punishment, and I was always like the inner critic was so brutal that like once I actually started to allow the work with the inner critic and develop self-compassion and self-love, which for a lot of guys sounds like you're just being a fucking pussy. That's pussy talk, you know. But like for guys who are like alpha male, like trying to achieve and get after it, and like the thing is, so much of it's driven by self-punishment. You know, and it comes at a point in time where if self-punishment and pain and low self-worth, if that's your fuel, they'll get you to there.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's not going to get you to there. And if it gets you to there, the collateral damage in other areas of your life are going to be diabolical.
Well, you mentioned inner critic. My understanding of inner critic is it's an internalized voice that we took on at some point. So a parent or a teacher or someone that said something to us, we tell ourselves the same stories on a loop because it gave us back some level of control. So if I'm at home and every time I make noise, my father says, shut your mouth. When I leave my home, I don't have my parents there to keep me safe. So I need this internal dialogue that keeps me safe. So it says, shut your mouth, shut your mouth. It just replays those same things we've heard. And the kind of analogy I share with business people is that the tendency is to be a slave driver that just pushes yourself and never acknowledges your progress. It's a bit like a child comes home from school and they say, I did this and I did this and I did this and I did this. And the parents just say, what's next? So there's like relentlessness versus a parent who says, that's amazing. How did that feel? Okay, how could you build upon that? Really simple. It's the same kind of thing, but it's like, the example I give is if I ask you to jump as high as you can, you're going to bend your knees first before you jump to give yourself a bit of momentum. So if you can acknowledge your progress, it gives you that bit of momentum as you step into the next piece.
That's very interesting. I was going to say, with how can one develop self-awareness around when they're operating from the ego and when they're operating from a place of authenticity? Ooh. In particular, when they haven't really done even probably the foundational work to understand their true self.
One way of looking at it, there's many ways you could look at it. One way of looking at it is the safer you feel in the world, the more authentic you can be. So if I am in an environment where I feel judged by everyone in the room, my masks are going to come up. If I'm around a friend who accepts me fully as I am, the masks are going to come down. So the safer I feel in my environment, or the safer I feel in my body, or the safer I feel in myself, the more likely it is I'll operate from an authentic place. So obviously the nervous system work, the link between the body and mind, there's this constant two-way conversation happening where the thoughts that I am having on autopilot are influencing how I feel in my body. If my thoughts are, I don't know how to speak in public, I'm going to feel anxious in my body and stress and tension and tingles and all this stuff. But equally, what's happening in my body influences how I see the world. So if you do a yoga class, your world's going to look, if you like yoga, your world's going to look more relaxing. If you drink 10 cups of coffee, it's going to be different. So I would suggest that in really simple terms, I think the more people can practice slowing down and creating a sense of ease in their body, the more the mind can open up to feeling safe, and then you can tune into like, what do I actually want? And you find again choice rather than autopilot, if that makes sense.
Definitely, and not judge what comes up.
Yeah.
What comes up is what you got to be able to sit with and document it, whether it's mentally, write it down, sit with it, and because that's like in the end, that's something that if we haven't sat with it and dealt with it, you don't, and you've got the performance mask on in particular, like you just want to get after the next thing, and just think, oh, well, I'm being unproductive, I'm being lazy, this is coming up. Nah, I don't need this. I'll have coffee, go to work out, just keep catch up, or catch up with someone, or just keep like everything's just that high intent, like training's intense, work's intense, everything's like go intensity. But the thing is, you can't have sympathetic just being sympathetic overdrive the whole time, as you know, with your breathing. And I only realized that recently through going through that course I've just finished, like the role of, and when you say breathing to most guys, if you said breathing to me 12 months ago, I'd be like, yeah, okay.
Well, you went in the best one. I mean, you went to world class.
Yeah, exactly right. And that's and I really wanted to, and it's funny, even I said the Martin when I was doing his course, I was like, it was 12 modules, and I was like, I really want to have another tool that I can use to help, particularly with like the coaching program, to give to guys to help them with stress management. That was almost what led me there, as opposed to probably what I got out of it. And then I said in the first few modules I did, I was like, fuck man, I felt like I'm just back at uni. I was like having full like, why did I sign up? I've got too much shit going on to do, like additional study and on top of everything I was doing. And it wasn't until went through the modules and started to understand and came back in the right time. We went through the application of hot and cold and application of breathing to exercise and just building up a system when to apply up regulation, down regulation, different techniques of breathing. And I was like, I'm a health professional, and even 12 months ago, I was like, I didn't have any basis in it, or any tools to understand it, and I'm a health professional, and it's one of those things when you say it to guys like, oh, breathwork, they're like, they naturally think, oh, trauma informed, like trauma breath release. It's like, no, there's a whole different, and you have to go to that level to get benefits in terms of, and most of the time, high intensity driven people, they need to focus more on just down regulating. And Wim Hof breathing is not down regulating. It's like everything. Ice baths. This is something I made a mistake with, like last year, because I got an ice bath sauna set up in my office, and then I was doing like ice baths 6 times a week. Sauna. Okay, you already know where this is going. Doing saunas like 5 times, and doing things right and doing things correctly in terms of what I thought, but I hadn't done the actual work to really understand all these processes and just following fairly generic, protocols and fairly generic advice. And it's like, I was burnt out. You don't give someone who's burnt out ice baths 6 times a week and so on, and everything, because obviously it works with the dopaminergic system to, you get the high when you come out. But the thing is, in terms of like the allostatic load that I was under, that cumulative load of the whole nervous system, it was just outrageous. And I was just addicted to like go, like work hard, train hard, have a couple coffees. Everything was just dopamine system. And then eventually it wasn't until I decided, I spoke to the mate, and he's just like, man, what the fuck are you doing? Just just don't do any ice baths, or do like one a week and like one sauna a week, and just literally that was the only change I made. Stopped doing ice baths for like 2 months, just did like 30-minute sauna a week. I felt significantly better without making any other changes.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah. So like, in a long about way, and then like understanding, different things like that, and how to, and just understanding, the ego, and how that at a basic level, and how that relates to, breath work, and, people dissociating, or people just repelling and avoiding, and how to access different parts of yourself and the things you're suppressing, and all that sort of stuff. So it's amazing to have, and I know obviously you take people through these processes, but there's so much value in terms of the application for for healing, just for stress management, for performance, for sleep, for health, for longevity. It's not just just this or just that. So it's it's amazing. It's an amazing toolkit to have.
A good way of framing it that I came across is a guy called Casper van der Meulen. He used to be Wim Hof's right-hand man. He's a great teacher. But he kind of talks about formal, informal, and peak experiences. So formal practice, informal practice, and peak practice. So he'll say that the peak practice is the trauma and, trauma release, that kind of stuff. He says in an athletic sense, it's almost like that's running the marathon. You can't do that every day. You can't do that every week. But doing it every once in a while is going to be like, oh, wow, this shows me what's possible. So if you do the big one-off breath work and you have a big experience, you got a lot of time then to integrate it. But then he's got formal and informal. He says informal is we're breathing 20,000+ times a day. So what's happening when we're not consciously thinking about it? And that's informed by our formal practice. So doing a 10-minute or 15-minute practice in the morning, whether it's, you mentioned Wim Hof, or it's whatever it is, starts to teach your body a new way of being. So it's almost like, I don't know, doing a workout in the gym is your formal practice. Your informal is being generally healthy outside of the gym. And then your peak experience is the big one-off event. I think that's a useful way of thinking about it.
Okay. People pleasing. This is something I find it's just huge these days, in terms of obviously there's being full-blooded people pleaser versus being showing up as your authentic self. How does people pleasing originate, and how does that show up in those various aspects of your life?
It originates from suppressing or repressing anger, and learning that anger is not safe to show or safe to express. So typically it'll happen in the terrible twos or whatever, where the child starts to have their own personality, and that's the period of life where we're supposed to start to sort of recognize that we're not fused with mum or dad. We're a separate individual in the world, and so I've got a puppy at the moment. They're in the terrible twos, I think, and they're starting to push the limits, like what can I do, what can I get away with, and for them to develop in a healthy way, I probably need to have some boundaries in place, so same for a child. If the parents don't allow the child some space to explore, and it's when the kids start saying, no, I'm not going to eat my vegetables, or no, I'm not going to go to the toilet. So they start fighting for themselves. If the parent really shuts that down, sometimes the child will have a lot of repressed anger. They learn that my voice doesn't matter, my needs don't matter. If my parents want me to eat when I don't want to eat, I'm kind of going against my own body's system and eating when I don't want to eat. If my parents make me sit in the toilet at a certain time of day because it suits their needs, I'm learning that their needs are more important than my needs. On the other side of the coin, if you didn't have any boundaries, you didn't have any discipline, the child's maybe going to become the opposite, and they're not going to care about anyone else's needs. So it's obviously a balancing act. But I think those are the origins. And then I think we've got a kind of a distorted view of what clean anger is. So when people think about anger, generally they think about aggression, or they think about rage, or they think about passive aggression. It's not actual anger that they're thinking about. Anger can be this really clear, clean process that says, no, that's not okay with me. That doesn't feel good for me. I'm not okay with that. That can be like a way of just putting my foot down in a way that isn't destructive. People think anger is destructive, but clean anger is protective. It's like, I'm going to protect what I value. So I think the people-pleasing piece is just, not having a sense of what it is to, it's a couple of things. One is, if I'm not clear on what I actually value and what I'm working toward, I don't really have much to protect. And so it's easy to just say yes to everyone around me. But if I've got a clear vision and I'm kind of clear on what's important to me, what I value, what I don't value, it's easier for me to protect those things. That would be my starting point, I think.
Definitely. It shows up hugely in relationships.
Yeah, the fear, what if they leave?
Especially if there's a perceived imbalance as well.
Yeah. When we say like our intimate partnerships will mirror our parental, it's kind of a weird way of thinking about it. They say like a lot of adult relationship is about finishing childhood. So you'll attract a partner who does the same thing your parents did. So if you had to always prove yourself to your father, there's a probability you'll attract a partner who you feel you always have to prove yourself to. And again, from a shadow perspective, there's an opportunity there to actually grow through it, but you need to work with it consciously. Otherwise, you'll just start feeling like, oh, I keep doing everything for her and she never just appreciates me.
Do you feel you can fully heal without being in a relationship?
No, that's why I'm still broken. No.
You almost have to be in a relationship to be able to fully heal.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. Because, I noticed this on a micro level during the lockdowns a couple of years ago. I locked myself in my house for 2 years and just studied courses. I did Gabor Mate's training. I did trauma release training. I was doing so much healing work. And I convinced myself, wow, I've worked through so much stuff that I've always carried. But sure, I wasn't interacting with anyone. It was like I was hiding in a cave. And then after 2 years, I went back out into the world and the dating world and all these things. I was like, oh, no, it's all still there. I think there's layers. I think you can start with maybe the mental layer of journaling a little bit and figuring out your stuff. Then you can move into the emotions and feeling your feelings. And then I think the real healing happens in relationship, friendship, in finding your voice, in being seen in ways. Yeah.
Cool. Very cool. When you're dealing with someone who's say like an entrepreneur who's stuck in procrastination, what's your process to help them?
A lot of it's about feeling the feelings you don't want to feel. When I was a child, we used to go to my grandmother's house. All the cousins would go once a week and play football in the garden. One of my cousins said, "Oh, there's a fox in the hedge." The ball went into the hedge, and he says, "The fox in there, evil fox, don't go near the hedge." And so I was afraid to go near the hedge, and suddenly this big garden got half the size. And I just had to stay on one side of the garden. Next couple of times I went to my grandmother's house. And then a couple of months later, I figured out there was no fox. And so suddenly the hedge opens up, or the garden opens up again. I've got all this room to roam. In a similar way, the more of our emotions we don't feel safe to feel, the more our world gets small. So if I'm not safe to feel my anger, then I don't have boundaries, and then I have to kind of keep myself in a box. If I'm afraid to feel my sadness, then I'm probably not going to open up to a relationship because there's the potential for sadness. So the more of our feelings we shut down internally, the more external stuff gets shut down. So with procrastination, like with all other self-sabotaging efforts, it's about feeling the feeling. So procrastination, I'd be looking at like, what's the fear?
Fear of failure, fear of success,
and feel that. Allow yourself to feel the consequences, and then there's nothing to. If I'm one of my favorite teachers, Joe Hudson, talks about this, particularly in relationship. He says him and his partner every couple of years grieve the relationship. They're together for years, but they both cry as if the relationship is over, and they feel all the feelings that would come if the relationship was over. And that means they don't have the same emotional charge to it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. Like some people who visualize their death.
Yeah.
And visualize them actually dying.
Yeah.
And have to start to go through that process obviously without dying, and in a similar way. They start to get grieve where they're at.
Yeah, because if you really feel it, it's like, oh, well, this is as bad as things can work out.
Yeah. And also then you're at peace with like moving forward.
The other practical bits with procrastination, I guess, is one thing, fear stops us. And oftentimes with fear, I remember an acronym years ago, was it? With fear, we fuse to our negative thoughts, so we only see the negative. FEAR. Oh, it's
is that's an acronym?
Some acronym I remember hearing years ago. But there was definitely something about trying to take too big a jump. So if you're
unrealistic goal setting, and
procrastinating on starting a podcast, well, maybe the first step is just to contact a podcast studio. Correct. Or just buy a microphone. So it's like, what's the easiest step I can take to get me started?
Yeah, because sometimes it's I think of things as like, whether it's a psychological thing, whether it's a strategic mechanical thing, generally it's probably more psychological and like there's a deeper layer, but sometimes it is just a strategic mechanical thing. Like, as you said, it's just like, just start a podcast.
Yeah.
Also, why do you want to start a podcast? More than anything, like why do you want whatever you're procrastinating about something? Why do you even want that? And okay, I start understanding, why do you want it? Okay, then start looking at, where the blockages that are happening. Because once you start going through, particularly the mechanical, logical stuff, and they're like, oh, like they understand what they need to do, but they're not doing it. It's like, okay, this isn't a mechanical issue. This isn't a logic. This isn't you just don't know what to do. 'Cause sometimes I think people just get overwhelmed and they just don't know what to do, and that sort of holds them back. Whereas you said they have unrealistic goal setting, and they're like, I want to start a podcast and I want to look like Stephen Bartlett or Chris Williamson. It's like, you're not. Like those guys have done they've been doing it for 6-7 years, and you got people who are like amazing at their craft. I mean, doing it a long time, and there's that comparison. Is a massive element, I think, of procrastination, fear of other people's opinion, and just getting, just doing that first step to go like, I'm like jiu-jitsu. You're going to come on the mats. First time you come mats, you're going to get your ass kicked. Yeah. Even if you're athletic and strong, you're going to get your ass kicked. Yeah. You know what I mean? And it's just yeah. Here we are a decade later, still get my ass kicked. But it's just like having that, just the first step, just build confidence, build your self integrity, and be able to go, oh, I can actually do that. I can do that. Create like such small steps. So it's just like you're just winning, and not getting attached to, oh, but I didn't get enough views. Oh, but I didn't do this well enough. It's like, yeah, but you fucking started. Most people haven't even got to a process in life, in things that you want to do. Most people haven't even started the process, of doing something that's like a bit non-conventional. So it's just like having to just get some wins and be very realistic with how you're trying to be more patient as well.
Yeah. Two jiu-jitsu stories, actually. One is, I remember some people saying, what's the hardest jiu-jitsu belt to get? And everyone says, oh, black belt. And then someone said, no, it's the white belt. It's the hardest thing to step in the door the first time and try. But I was on my friend Paddy Houlihan's podcast years ago. He used to fight in the UFC. He's one of Conor McGregor's teammates and all this. And he said, I think it was a blue belt at the time. And he said, do you know how long it takes the average person to get a blue belt? And I said, no. And he goes, the average person doesn't get a blue belt. I was like, oh, that's brilliant.
It's true.
But I think the piece on what we're talking about, I think what's coming through is around if you let go of all the results that you're kind of hoping for in all areas of life, what would it require for you to enjoy your average day? So effectively, I don't know, if someone's podcasting to try and get to, again, Chris Williamson or Stephen Bartlett or any of these people's numbers, then it's like, okay, I'm under the illusion that someday I'm going to be happy. Even if you do get it, you're probably not going to be happy. So it's kind of like, what would I actually like to do on a daily basis that would allow me to enjoy the process? Maybe it's I don't know, 2 hours of practice of my I don't know.
It's like I think whatever the thing is, whether it's jiu-jitsu, podcasting, anything that that's going to take a long time to develop some acumen in it. And anything that's worth doing is going to take it's going to be hard, and it's going to take a long time. If it's quick, without sounding corny,
it's probably going to take twice as long as you think. Minimum,
yeah, correct. Yeah, whether it's starting business, it's going to take a long time to be successful. And I think it's like sometimes people have that all or nothing mentality as well. I mean, I've definitely got elements of it in me. Yeah, the ADHD business side is very that sort of way as well. But yeah, there's so many, like what we just said, so many comparison, unrealistic goal setting, fear of failure, fear of success, not being realistic and not being patient or having self-compassion about sucking, but really coming from a place of, why do you want to pursue whatever this thing is? It's all right just to pursue it, and if you don't like it, no worries. But if you really like it, and that's the thing, with jiu-jitsu now with me, I've gone from my white belt, blue belt, purple belt was always all right, in 2.5 years, because I can get to the next belt, because our gradings were once every 6 months. It's like four tips, and this, if I just show up, I'm going to do it. But that was the wrong mentality, because I didn't. When I was competing as white and blue, I was competing a lot, and I was really enjoying jiu-jitsu. But then once I got my purple, COVID hit, and then I started indexing way harder on business. My jiu-jitsu gym's a bit further, then you get out of it. And I think because I came from a place of, it was all about the result. Oh, I've got to win competitions. I've got to get my belt. I've got to get the next tip. It wasn't I fell out of love with it. Yeah. And over the next 7 years now, it's been I've been on my brown belt for 4 years, and it's only I'm talking very recently, and it was a book I read, that sort of shifted me a bit. Like rather than being that extra, it's great to have the goals and the extra. I want to get my black belt, but I was like, you got to fall in love with the process again. Like you got to fall in love with you and be like, who gives a shit when I get my black belt? You fall in love with it and just slowly start. Let the ego go. Try different things on the mats, and that's something I never did because I had so much like attachment to trying to be good in control and in competitions, like having to win, and as opposed to just like just enjoy the process. Be curious about, try different things. Whenever like just try and rock out. If you only go once a week for 2 weeks, and then you can get back in the 3 or 4 times. Don't judge yourself. Yeah. So I think for me, it's going back to, and I really want to be worthy of it when I get my black belt. But I'm no longer attached to thinking, I've did my goal setting at the start of the year. I really want to get it by boom. Because the more I did that, the more I found I actually sabotage rocking up.
Yeah. I think of extreme athletes sometimes in terms of, I think it came from like the flow research where, you watch kids skateboarding or BMXing or snowboarding and all these things. It's not like maybe normal sports where there's a coach. Maybe it's changed in recent years, but back in the day, I know growing up when I was skating and all this kind of thing, just you meet your friends and you play around on the boards for a couple of hours, and it's not this like, you're trying to push yourselves a little bit, but you're just in an environment where you're experimenting, you're playing, you're showing up every day, you're having a laugh. It's not overly structured. And the things that they do in the X Games are just incredible. Like look at Tony Hawk and Dave Mirra and all these people back in the day. It's like, and I'm sure today it's even wilder. So I guess maybe how can we bring a bit more of that kind of playfulness into our business and whatever. So it's like, okay, I'm trying to do that at the moment, like do 2-hour blocks a day of like really deep work.
Deep work, yeah.
Because I think the other thing that came to me with the procrastination is, again, Chris Williams, I've quote so many people. I think Chris Williamson says the feelings that you're chasing are on the other side of the work you're avoiding.
Correct. Yeah.
And so there's this tendency with procrastination. It's like, I could be doing so many other things, and just being stuck in the head. It's like my ritual at the moment is I put on a song on a loop for 2 hours. It just puts me into this state. Yeah, like I'll put on a Ben Howard song and then play the same song for 2 hours, and I just go somewhere, and it just brings me to, depending on the work I'm doing, but like a flow state. If I'm writing books, that's what I do. What's
your optimal day look like?
This doesn't happen very often, but my optimal day, I've just kind of been playing around with this at the moment. Ideally 12,000 steps, just to be like getting some headspace and walking the dog. I'm doing do nothing meditation at the moment, which is literally just sitting there and doing nothing with the eyes open. So noticing when the mind comes in wanting to do something and just trying to drop it. Not even trying to drop it, just letting it be. Jiu-jitsu, if I can make it. And 2-hour work blocks. When I look at it that way, I'm like, that's a pretty simple and easy day and I can do a lot, but sometimes then I overcomplicate it and I try to do more. But
so do you find your, like a 2-hour block is enough to do date work?
2 hours good for me I do 2 hours. It's good for me to get started, and I'll end up going more than that. But if I set the goal to do 3 hours or 4 hours, it seems too much and I won't do it. But this morning I sat down and I said I'm going to do 2 hours. I probably did 4. Yeah. And I'll do another 2, so it's probably dropping the base. It's kind of like that thing of they say go for a 5-minute walk and you'll end up going for more.
Yeah, 100%, yeah.
I think it takes at least a half an hour to drop into that.
It's interesting what everyone's, but that's something I've shifted with, is doing more just deep work, doing less, and going and just auditing, going, okay, what's the most important thing that's going to move the needle the most? And often, like exactly what you're saying, like these days I'm much more in alignment with going, what am I avoiding? That's what you got to do. And always having that, whether it's conversation, whether it's activity, or it's something, or it's just something that's like a bit of a niggly, sticking thing that's like not, because sometimes these sort of things, they're not big.
Yeah.
But they're just sticky, so we can go, this is bigger, that can just wait. And then you, like 2 months later, you're like, I still haven't fucking addressed this thing.
Yeah. It's somewhere there in the background, taking up space, right?
And 100%. Yeah. And what does that do to your self-worth? Yeah. And then it starts to like erode your capacity to be able to like show up. Because the thing is, you'd be out of integrity with yourself. And the more you avoid things, you're not going to, and rightfully so. If you're avoiding things left, right, and center, you're not going to have this positive internal, reflection of yourself. Yeah. Until you actually start addressing these things. And
Phil Stutz is the therapist, the Jonah Hill's therapist. They did a documentary with him, Stutz. He calls them death cookies. So this is, you eat the death cookie and you get all this energy back again. So it's like, I don't know, a time where maybe you have been putting off washing your car for weeks, and you go and do it, and suddenly you feel like think of energy. I think sometimes the energy that we're looking for is actually on the other side of those kind of small things that are in the
and 95% of the times these things that we build up that we don't do, they're very easy.
Yeah.
And when you do them, you're like, I actually gave that way too much. That occupied way too much space in my mind. Yeah, overwhelmingly majority. Like for me, like, I don't. If it's something like I could do some like niggly backhand account stuff like because I obviously got people that deal with all that stuff, and you're like, fuck. All right, I've got to like come back from Europe and I've got all these like 350 like different items. I've got to see whether that's personal, whether it's business, whether this, whether it's that.
It's a good feeling getting that stuff.
Yeah,
I hate doing it, but it feels good after.
And that's with like the deep work sessions. Sometimes it's not. It's I try and do it the most thing that's going to move the biggest constraint in my business or life that I need to deal with. And that's your own. Got to develop awareness around like what is the most important thing. But I think you get to a point when you're actually trying to knock less things off, because I used to have the massive to-do lists, and that's just like a recipe for disaster with someone who's like ADHD, you know what I mean? It's so like now it's just like, okay, from my like quarterly things I'm planning to monthly to weekly, and I reverse engineer like what I want to do, and okay, what's the most important thing? Like what's the most important thing now? And I have like maybe 3 different things, and then my next table I always write down what's important next. So I've always like think now and what's the next step, and trying. Whereas before I'd be like either looking too far down the pipeline, or just getting like trying to do too much. And I find that when you actually do hit those needle moving things that need to get done, you just shift. Yeah, like really, because like just being busy and ticking things off a fucking list. That's like you get that little dopamine, but it's like do that for like a month and go, has my life actually improved that much, or do I just feel good about myself? As opposed to how about scrap most of that shit and actually just do, whether it's building your online course or building the back end support or like creating your own AI version of Pat that can help support clients. You know what I mean? Things like whatever it is, like with what I'm doing, it's just sometimes there's these things you're like, fuck, if I actually put the time into that and do that. It's just going to make everything else so much better.
Yeah. Makes me think of almost doing an audit of the last couple of years and asking like what were the 3 or 4 projects that have had the biggest impact, like the simple terms, thinking of like, oh, I built a course once and I still sell it to this day. It's that kind of thing of build it once, sell it many times or whatever.
What would be the probably 2 things at the moment for you that would move the needle the most?
Think time.
Sorry?
Thinking
time.
Yeah.
So like creating space.
Just taking pen and paper. I started studying with a guy recently called Matt Church. He's Australian, I think, or else is he Kiwi? I'm not sure. But he runs a business called Thought Leaders, and his thing is that we're a practice as opposed to a business. So he talks about, okay, well, if you're like doing similar to what we're doing, you can take your information and the 6 ways you can deliver. I'm trying to think of them. There's like, you can mentor people, you can coach, you can speak, you can write a book, you can maybe train the trainer, and there's one more. So he's like, okay, you take the one thing and then but he says there's 3 things we should be doing in business: thinking, selling, and delivering, which kind of makes sense to me. So thinking is like, okay, how can I unpack my ideas? There's a million ideas. So I just try and take some time. They have this pink sheet process, which is pretty cool, where you take your idea. There's one section where you'll draw a diagram to explain your idea, because some people think in that way. Then you'll tell a story or a metaphor that helps share your idea. Then you'll put some facts so it really helps you to better understand what you're trying to teach.
Storytelling, emotive, logical brain, all those sort of things. Yeah.
So I've never consciously done that in the past. So doing a bit of that recently has been useful. So I think that's a big needle mover. And just recording modules and evergreen content that's always going to be there. I've got like such a database of hundreds of hours of lectures from the last 6 years that I've recorded. So there's just a lot there. So that's probably the highest yielding thing.
Interesting. Yeah. In terms of what made you want to move from Ireland to Bali?
Being single, and it wasn't about like, oh, I want to like move to Bali because all the women are so beautiful here. It was more just like,
come on, man.
I'm 37. It's kind of cliche, but I'm at this stage of life where a lot of my friends are married with kids, and Ireland's relatively small. And so socially, I just found it a little bit isolating. I have my jiu-jitsu friends, but they're a bit younger and stuff like that. And just socially, I kind of felt like life was passing me by a little bit. Came out of a relationship at 30, and then COVID happened like 3 years later, and then suddenly I woke up. I was like, wow, I feel like the last 6 years have kind of, business has been fine and training's been fine, but I feel like my social life has just not been. Yeah, my life has been all about work, and so I wanted more balance. I wanted more lifestyle, and just wanted to shake it up. I was kind of in a comfort zone back in Ireland. I knew a lot of people. I was comfortable in the space, and so yeah, that was what brought me here. And it's been great. It's been challenging at times, but it's been yeah.
How do you build structure into your life in Bali?
Oh, that's the big one. Yeah, that's difficult. And I'm diagnosed ADHD also, so it's related. Yeah, because it's such a free place, I think you really have to find your own internal boundaries. And I think the first couple of weeks getting here, I had all these judgments about Bali. Well, I thought I never wanted to come here. I've traveled all over the world, but I thought it's full of influencers.
What's been the most surprising thing?
It's everything.
Positive or negative?
Well, it's everything I thought it would be in terms of the influencers and like people, on the back of bikes with vape pens, like zombies, and like, and cameras everywhere in the gyms and all this kind of thing.
Yeah.
But what's been surprising? I feel very blessed in the people that I've met. I've met some really good people. I mean, the locals are amazing. The food, there's so much greatness here. But yeah, the first couple of weeks I remember, and I've had this because I've lived in different places. When you arrive, you're kind of like, oh crap, it feels like everyone knows each other, and I feel a bit lost, and you're kind of trying to find your roots. And a friend of mine said to me, within weeks, you'll walk down the road and you'll know half the town, and you'll have to just say no to every invitation you get, because you know how it is here. You could sit drinking coffee all day and do nothing. So in terms of trying to develop structure, it's kind of what I was talking about earlier. I've got like a couple of business calls that I run at certain times every week. I've got my men's group on a Tuesday that I host with like 9 of my friends here. Got jiu-jitsu, bring the dog out for a walk a couple of times a day to try to do my 2-hour work blocks. There's a bit of structure there. It's still relatively loose, but still working on that piece, I think.
Definitely. Yeah, that's something that I still feel I'm at a level where I don't feel Perth in Australia is going to be my... I don't know. I definitely don't think it's going to be my full-time home. I don't feel like it's... Whether it's my... I'm there for 50% of the year, travel 50%, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Like for me, I just get so much more expansion from travel.
Yeah.
In particular, going to places where it's like... I love going to like... Obviously, there's holiday travel, but then there's business travel and going to places where people are really like kicking ass and switched on, and they're and people who are aligned with you who are like that, not just people you're not aligned with who are just kicking ass, making like. So for me, like I definitely want to have that bit of autonomy to be able to go like moving forward, because in Australia, just like it's much harder in Ireland than Australia. You just don't have, especially being in Perth, like you're on the other side. It's not being like if you're in Sydney or Melbourne, you got more access to it. But like for where I personally want to go, I really want to tap into, being able to go, whether it's like, go to places like LA, go to places like Austin, go to places like Dubai, just because you will get, obviously, Dubai is the same thing as well, like Bali. They've obviously got both sides of the coin there. But like I still don't know whether, I just don't get inspired and feel expansive in Australia.
Yeah.
On a long term. Yeah, so that's what, like, I'm still wrestling with I've got a great brick and mortar business, and I want to obviously keep growing that as I get more and more off the tools, and obviously start setting up some coaching stuff. Yeah, that's where I'm sitting with. Like a place like Bali, I've got mates that live here, and they're like, yeah, you should just live here, man. Australia's bullshit. And I'm like, yeah, I get it. I like Australia's going down. Australia's nice. I like Australia's cool, but it's going down a certain path, which is a bit interesting as well. But like I think for me, here is a place I could definitely come several times a year, connect with people. But I think for me, I would struggle here.
Yeah.
I'm very structured and routine. I'd probably need to be in a place that's a bit more, not chaos, but like a bit more drive. And it doesn't need to be necessarily super structured, but just a bit more. I just haven't really been exposed to like a lot of aspiration in Bali, like a lot of grounded aspiration.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure there's people out there who are.
I hear a lot of common stories, people, a lot of kind of expats here that have been here 4 or 5 years ago start to say, oh, I'm not sure anymore if it's like, it's been great. And now maybe it's time for something new. And then others talk about, they've felt that for a long time, but something keeps pulling them back. And, So it's like anywhere else, I guess there's pros and cons, and it's just
Definitely.
appreciating it for what it is. But I think I was 15 years probably traveling 4 months a year, just all over the world, going to different places. And I was like, I need to find a base. I want to live somewhere different, but I need a base. So probably similar to yourself. I think in time, maybe a couple of months in Ireland, a couple of months in Southeast Asia, a couple of months somewhere else. That might be the setup.
Okay, that could potentially be the ideal.
Depending on what the future missus wants.
Exactly right. Exactly right. No, 100%. And that's like yourself. That's probably like a similar thing for me. There's that piece as well. Otherwise, you probably could just go 6 months, base somewhere, go to America for a month, come back.
I don't know that we're meant to. When I travel, I mean, I love traveling, but sometimes I think, what would my ancestors think? If they were waking up on one side of the world and tomorrow they're on the other, it's kind of like, this is wild.
Oh, definitely. When we talk about getting in alignment, what does alignment mean to you?
It's knowing your values and living in integrity with your values. So, simple starting point for people with their values might be things like asking, what words would I like my friends to use to describe me? What are the words I would like to hear at my funeral as to the type of man or woman I was? Who am I when I'm at my best? What do I admire in other people? A lot of these kind of questions can point to your values. So mine would be things like playfulness, curiosity. Those are the two big ones actually for me: playfulness, curiosity, a bit of adventure. And so then you look at your life and you ask, like, where are the places where I'm in line with my values, and where am I out of alignment? So I say I'm playful, but then I take myself too seriously. Okay, that's something I might shine light on. I say I'm curious, but then I'm judging my work colleagues. Okay, that's something I could. So I think it's just doing a kind of regular audit as to where am I acting in line with my values and where am I not. Like, really simple thing could be if people identify 3 values that are important to them, and every day sat down in the morning, we talk about it. To-do list, you could think about a to-be list. So today I want to be playful, be curious, be inspiring. How can I bring that into my day? That's my kind of way of seeing it. Yeah.
Interesting. In terms of taking people through values process, I heard one guy say it. He goes, a lot of your values are actually come from perceived voids.
Yeah.
Not necessarily voids, but perceived voids. And when I actually listened to that and I went through my values list, I was like, it's actually pretty spot on. Like things like freedom, because I had so much control over me my whole life. Like there was so much control. So like freedom was a value.
Yeah.
Growth. But not, I want to say growth, probably like learning's a value, definitely. And where that come from, I was a shit student. So I love, like if you gave me whatever level of income I had, I would still want to like learn and grow and develop. I'd probably just go to the best of the best in the world and go, I just want you to work with me one-on-one and whatever that costs. Like I know that's a genuine value. And like things like creativity, variety, leadership, and they're things that just, is just like creativity. We got Irish background, Irish Catholic background. Like it's almost like get shunned.
Yeah.
Because it's like, what the fuck are you doing? Like creativity and variety. I just didn't have like variety. I had to do like the same things and do what I was told and that sort of stuff. So it's funny how even like I guess wanting to be seen, that sort of stuff as well. It's interesting how I wouldn't say status definitely status isn't a value. It's like that was something that was that I was chasing for so long.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. Even like things like money, how like you can come from like I came from like a middle class upbringing, but I went to like a private or boys' school, so it was very like compared to the other boys. The other boys are like there's a lot of money there, and we would have been below that, but we're still well above average of what everyone else is.
Sure.
But you compare since you're 9 years old, like where they live, what they were given, that sort of stuff as well, and then it was almost like this created like this. I need to be able to like provide. And there was like a void there as well.
With money, with a value, like and other values, I'm sure you could kind of ask like, what's the value behind the value? So
Yeah,
like
of course.
for one person, money is comfort. For another, it's status. For another, it's
Could be things like significance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other piece I find useful that I don't really hear anyone talking about is the idea of shadow values. So if my value is curiosity, the shadow is judgment. Like it's kind of the opposite. And so you can just recognize where in my life am I being judgmental. and your ego wants to say, well, I'm not judgmental, but your shadow is. So
Yeah.
I think that's useful. If your value is freedom, then your shadow value is rigidity, where my life
Control and things like that. Yeah, yeah.
And that can be an audit. That can be useful too.
Yeah, very cool. Finally, what does a successful life look like for you at the moment?
What would I like it to be, or where?
Yeah, how do you sort of visualize success? What does success look like for you now?
Partnership, relationship feels like the missing piece. So finding the right woman, and committing and developing a lasting relationship that's inspiring. I think that feels important for me. Yeah, that's the piece. I think I enjoy my work. I enjoy my training. I enjoy my lifestyle. I would like to build a life with someone and share it with someone. That's the piece.
You want kids?
Yeah.
It wasn't convincing.
You know what? It's like
that was very unconvincing.
Look, for all the work I've done over the years, I started a psychotherapy training not too long ago, and body-based psychotherapy. And the first day, we're like, everything's kicking off in the room. It's wild. Everyone's shouting at each other like crazy stuff. And the facilitator looked at me and he goes, "You need to handle this now if you want the wife and kids you've always wanted." And I was just like, I thought, I've never said that to you. I've never said that to myself. But it was confronting. And I was like, I think I've just been really scared that I wouldn't be able, or I wouldn't, it would take my freedom and all this stuff. But I had a shift then. I was like, yeah, I'm definitely open to kids. Yeah.
I think it's probably hard to live a full life without going through that. You still live a good life, but I think they have the full spectrum of. I think there's definitely probably a element of like going through, whether it's marriage, whatever, like long-term partner, and then procreating, family, going through that process. So even though it's probably not for everyone, but I think there's probably, in terms of being able to live a full life. That's my own personal experience.
What's a good life for you, or what's your vision?
What's success? Success for me is doing meaningful work, like being open to learn, grow, live a very expansive life, developing deeper, meaningful relationships, and having positive impact, being able to positively impact others. Yeah. Like that's for me. And it's funny how I heard recently, I think it's Jimmy Carr goes like someone, like one of his nowadays does those hecklers things. The hecklers like the shorts, they heckle him on it. Someone goes, what's rich? And he goes, what's rich? And he's basically, his explanation of it was, if your life would not, if you're at a level your life wouldn't really change much, you're rich. Like, it's not like a monetary thing. Okay. And I looked at it and I went, yeah, besides probably flying a bit more and going maybe like, first class, I was like, my life actually wouldn't really change that much. Like, in terms of the things I genuinely value, it wouldn't actually really change that much. Sure. So I feel like I'm living a rich life. I just think it's just having that alignment around having your health, meaningful relationships, meaningful work, and like yourself, probably the missing link would be having and developing the family. Yeah, so quite like I definitely connect with you a lot.
Give it a couple of years. Hopefully we can do a part two. We'll be talking about how stressed we are.
Exactly right. Awesome, man. Well, thank you for your time, Pat. It was awesome. Have a good chat. Cheers, man. Thank you.